His last summer show was here at the Queen's in 1960. Top of the bill as he had been for over 30 years in show business. A rich man with many houses, yachts and motor cars. At one time said to be paying income tax to the tune of tens of thousands a year. He was born in another Lancashire town, in Wigan, one of the large family of George Formby, the comedian with the tragic gag, coughing better tonight. To find the place, you go down Portland Street and turn into Westminster Street.
Neath the shady trees, 2 miles of one-eye cling, while the birds above...
And there it is, number 6. The little terrace house where still and neat curtains and the sparkling windows defy the bleakness and grime, even though the gardens around fight a losing battle. George put all this behind him and soon became an international figure on the stage, on radio and on films. It made you laugh just to look at him, people said. Even during the war when life wasn't all that happy, was it?
This one, have you ever heard this one, have you? This one, Mary married Sir Battle Blonde. The next morning she sang this song, oh Lord, you made the night too long.
Audiences everywhere loved George Formby, that lovable, happy clown. But was it just George they loved? Was his popularity due entirely to his personality, or was he in fact a great performer? Well, some people in the business thought he was.
It's me granddad's flannel-led nightshirt. In it I was christened one day. Down at the church, they were in the world. No one seemed to know if I were boy or girl. They'd add 1 or 2 and either were in a mess. But it's all right, said the preacher rather curt. I've been another quiz and I found out what it is by his granddad's flannel.
The man who wrote this song and many others for George, Eddie Latter, certainly thought so.
He was a good act, there's no question on that. It was a hard profession, and he went to the top, and he did it by his own decisions. Beryl helped, of course, but there was nothing gormless about George, although he appeared so in his films. In fact, he was a hard-headed Lancashire lad.
But it's only fair to say that the majority of people who knew George believed that the greatest driving force behind him was his wife, Beryl. Some said that without her, George wouldn't have got anywhere, that he wouldn't have had 2 halfpennies to rub together. Beryl, the wife who never let him out of her sight, who steered him towards stardom in the early days, who later looked after his hard-won thousands, who handed out his pocket money at the end of the week. Because of her concern for him, and because she certainly knew how hard it was to get to the top and stay there, she'd been a well-known dancer herself before she met George, she was untiring in her efforts to see that he was never underestimated, never underpaid, and never alone. As she herself said.
Wherever George had to go, Beryl had to go too. I just used to say all the time, if you want George, you've got to have me. And they always wanted George, so they had to put up with me.
Joe Hill, manager of the Grand Theatre Bolton, where George first appeared in pantomime in 1932, certainly knew that Beryl was the power behind the throne.
I don't think George was a nitwit, but I do think that he owed quite a lot to the people who were around about him. His mother, his wife Beryl, who was a general manager, personal manager, front of house manager, in fact a general factotum to George. She always saw that his act was presented in a perfect manner. He was immaculately dressed always.
Immaculately dressed always, Beryl insisted. She knew the value of appearances. She also knew that if you want the best, you've got to pay for it. And she did just that to get George started in the world of pantomime. Now, Bert Lohman, Northern Theatre impresario, tells how.
I went over to the Grand Theatre Bolton one week, going back in the dark ages, and George happened to be on the bill, and I'd gone over there to see an act called the 4 Brownie Boys. I was going upstairs into the dressing room when Maurice Goodman, the stage manager, came to me and he said, "Look, George has just been to me and told me that he wanted to see you before you left the building. Would you go down into number 1 room?" I said, "Yes." I went down into number 1 room. I said, what